Welcome everybody to Cosmodore. Since the response on my season 4 video has just been overwhelming and there have been so many people wanting me to cover all the remaining seasons as well, I guess I just have to be the only cartoon reviewer covering every episode of Spongebob on YouTube. No one has ever done this before. No one has ever. SpongeBob Season 5 was always an interesting case for me. It was the last one I remember consciously watching and being excited for new episodes of. Somewhere around the 6th season was when I stopped watching the show altogether for 3 years or so, since even when I was a kid I thought that the episodes just weren't as good as those from seasons 1 to 4. But whether that was really true or not, I could never put my finger on, so working on this list was definitely a good way to reevaluate my thoughts on this season, and there will probably be some quite unusual picks on this list again, so do let me know which ones you would have put on which spot instead. In case you're new to this channel, I should probably also say that I'm going to cover every single episode of the season, including the specials and shorts, from the least entertaining all the way up to my personal favorites. I plan on doing the same with other shows and possibly movies in the future, so stay tuned for okay, I'll stop talking. These are all the episodes from SpongeBob Season 5, ranked from worst to best. Number 41 goes to Fungus No, I will not talk about this episode. I refuse. Number 40, okay, let's do it. Let's quickly run down why Fungus Among Us is the most idiotic, pointless, insulting, hideous, disgusting. I mean, I don't have to explain most of this to you, do I? Just looking at this footage speaks for itself, and I hope that you are, because I certainly can't. This health hazard of an episode fails at having a good narrative, anything remotely resembling entertainment, or any form of redeeming qualities, really. But most of all, it is just unpleasant to look at, which is putting it very lightly. I despise this episode with every fiber of my soul, and won't waste another second of my life talking about it. Whew, I'm glad that's settled. Can only get better from here. Number 40 is a flea in her dome. I should learn to keep my big mouth shut. A flea in her dome faces many of the same problems Fungus Among Us has, most noticeably the needlessly disturbing imagery. And I swear the only funny joke in this one is Patrick spitting out a perfectly Texas-shaped cake. That's it. No build-up, no resolution, just fleas, fleas, fleas. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Now I'm the one who flees. Number 39 is Band in Bikini Bottom. So, we have a character that has never eaten a Krabby Patty before, and does anything in its power to work against ever having to try one, only for it to end up trying it after all in the end, and be completely amazed by the patty's taste. And yeah, you know where this is going. It's basically the same plot as Just One Bite, only with some less interesting or funny characters and some needless junk around it. Okay, to be honest, it isn't exactly the same. It is more reminiscent of sort of prohibition laws, and them having to work in SpongeBob's pineapple is a nice change of pace. But it's still just so unfunny. 20,000 Patties Under the Sea is another episode that really makes me feel as though the writers didn't care at all about the quality of it. We have a little boy that's just sort of standing around in the fields as Plankton is looking around for customers, along with a bunch of other guys also just sort of standing there. Why? There's one moment where Mr. Krabs is talking about it being a slow day and that, quote, their only competition is the chum bucket across the street. Well, firstly, I wouldn't exactly call Plankton competition, and secondly, again, we are in season 5, guys. You would assume that the viewers know this at this point. I know these criticisms may seem a bit nitpicky, but it was just all a bit too convenient for my taste, and the episode just also not as entertaining as it could have been.
Someone should put you in a box floating down the river!
Cosmodore.
You're probably right.
Number 37, Atlantis Squarepantis. Possibly the most hated special of the first 5 seasons, and I can't say that I don't see why. The songs are pretty freaking awful, these new character designs are just hideous, Spongebob and Patrick are just too dumb for their own good. But most importantly, this piece wouldn't fit. My OCD is going crazy over here. I know it isn't all bad, Plankton's song is okay, the animation on Squidward's and Sandy's sections are pretty creative, but the whole structure of this episode feels as though there just wasn't put that much thought into it, which makes it really fitting that this was the special that ended up spawning a bunch of subpar console video games. Except for the DS one. That one's okay. Number 36, Waiting. This episode doesn't have a whole lot going for it. Spongebob is pretty unlikable, Patrick is pretty much just a nuisance in making the episode move forward, which at 6 minutes runtime is a pretty bad thing to be the case, and it's also just not funny at all. I always hated this episode just for how mean it is, and while it is very relatable in the sense that it's always awful having to wait for a package to arrive, they could have handled it so much better. Why not have some other characters waiting alongside the two? Why not make a game of it and have the two saddened rather than frustrated? That would make sympathizing with SpongeBob a lot easier and the episode just a lot more engaging in general. You could even have had them waiting for multiple packages to arrive, for example, and work off the multiple character traits that way. Number 35, Whatever Happened to SpongeBob?
Morning, Mr. Mailman.
Morning, SpongeBob. It is a good morning, isn't it?
Killing a character within the first 30 seconds. Always a good sign. This is the culmination of mean-spirited episodes, at least in terms of SpongeBob-centered ones. The whole beginning is just him crying and jokes that don't land because of the episode's overall tone, which does get better as the special progresses, but even as he is left on his own and tries to find himself again, it is just not that entertaining, and I also don't think that the two different plots going on at once are handled all that well. Number 34, To Love a Patty.
Enjoy, sir.
Can I eat this one? Hey, how'd they know? I love grilled chew.
This is one of my favorite lines of the show, and I like the little song they have in the middle of the episode, but other than that, this one really only feels like it was meant to creep you out and portray SpongeBob in too negative and clingy of a light to me. In episodes like All That Glitters, this was charming because he seemed to genuinely be in distress, but here not even the moral in the end feels genuine, because it's essentially if someone doesn't look the way they used to anymore, just let them go! What kind of end to an episode is that? Not to mention it's super gross. Number 33, Krusty Sponge. This is another one of those episodes that is just way too mean towards Squidward for no reason in particular, and while I like the metaphor for real-life SpongeBob merchandise, I think that selling rotten Krabby Patties is a bit too much, even for Mr. Krabs. In other episodes, this would probably be where he would have drawn the line, and so he definitely would have deserved what was coming for him. But no, they went the cop-out route in the end. Very frustrating. Number 32, Spongehenge. What a strange episode. From the premise to the execution, especially SpongeBob having to live in a cave to escape the jellyfish. This episode is just random and somehow just annoys me. Number 31, The Inmates of Summer. Did Patrick really want to bring a coffin with him here? Huh. Also, when they perform their play towards the end, the instructor is a bit too easily touched by this rather mediocre play, don't you think? Really makes it seem as though the stakes were very low for these inmates, and that additional part with the real camp at the end is also a bit dumb, which makes it another episode with a nice enough concept, but lackluster execution and poor structure. Number 30, The Battle of Bikini Bottom. Not to be confused with Battle for Bikini Bottom, and this episode is gosh darn lucky to be not too terrible, because I would have been very mad had this one tarnished the good name of my favorite SpongeBob game of all time. Please don't ruin the remake, please don't ruin the remake. SpongeBob's and Patrick's battle starts off a lot better than the conclusion in the end is. Had they said that they had come to appreciate the other's viewpoint and that both being clean and dirty has its advantages, that would be something else. As is, this is just some very backwards logic in my opinion. It's still not a bad episode, although Patrick's strategies can be a bit unpleasant to the eye. Number 29, Blackened Sponge. This one has a lot of missed potential in terms of structure, The stories SpongeBob comes up with are just the right amount of ludicrous, which makes for some good comedy, but it wasted too much time on beginning and end for my taste, and I kind of wish SpongeBob had gotten what he deserved in the end. Mermaid Man vs. SpongeBob. One of the only two Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy episodes in the 5th season, and a pretty meh one at that. The ending was very lackluster again. All the kids being ripped off and the Krusty Krab is just a weaker version of Krabbyland, and if there's one thing I didn't want to see, it was Barnacle Boy's dandruff. I can see why people would like this one, but Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy had so many better episodes before this that I kind of wish they utilized them more instead of them just being portrayed as mindless old-timers, in this case not only figuratively speaking. They already only had 2 appearances in season 4, with one of them just being a cameo and the other a pretty weak ending to the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy sextology, that I think it's time for a comeback. Number 27, Stanley as SquarePants. Although the DuckTales reference and Teen Squidward are pretty great, I still feel like Stanley is just too uninteresting of a one-off character, not to mention that SpongeBob snaps far too quickly. And I probably just also don't like it because Stanley is a tad too relatable to me. Number 26, Blackjack. They were trying way too hard with SpongeBob's relatives in this season, and this one is even more in it than Stanley as SquarePants had, but it's a teeny bit better because SpongeBob isn't as big of a prune and actually manages to overcome his fear, not to mention that I love Uncle Captain Blue. Number 25, Picture Day. This is the very definition of a meh episode for me. Nothing really happens except for SpongeBob running around town and being hit by a bunch of stuff, but there aren't really any jokes here despite the pretty great picture book in the end. I always forget about this episode, and rewatching it made me realize why. Number 24, Pat No Pay. This is one of those shorts that I wish had just been a little bit longer. I would have loved to see a full day of Patrick working at the Krusty Krab, but I guess we had already seen that in Big Pink Loser. In that episode, however, Patrick still had a sweet moment of closure in the end. Here, he really is just nothing short of dumb, but I think this problem could have been fixed without losing the episode's charm. As is, it is just an alright episode. Number 23, Goo Goo Gas. This is definitely one of Plankton's most creative schemes, and it actually used to be one of my favorite season 5 episodes because of how cute the designs of the babies are, and I still think that it has some pretty clever moments, like SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs as old people, and Plankton being turned into an amoeba in the end, but it also has a few unnecessary fart jokes, and doesn't really go beyond, oh, they're babies now. That's the joke. Number 22, Rise and Shine. This one is pretty fun in the beginning, but gets a bit too stupid in the end. They still made the best of the short runtime though, and we actually got some nice lines out of it.
I gotta put on my teeth and brush my pants!
Number 21, To Save a Squirrel. Quite possibly the most misleading episode title, because I don't know if you noticed, but if anyone was saved, it's really only Patrick and SpongeBob. And it's also another one of those episodes where Patrick is the main reason for all the terrible things happening to the both of them, which I just hate every time it happens. It is still pretty fun to see them revert to their primal state and go absolutely nuts though, I'll give them that. Number 20, The Donut of Shame. This episode really makes me wonder just how much money Patrick has that he can afford buying new plates every time he opens his cupboard, and I think it's also pretty commendable for him to tell SpongeBob about him stealing SpongeBob's donut. It shows that Patrick can actually be a nice enough friend, but I still think that this episode could have used a bit more comedy. It's mostly just him looking through his house and going into flashbacks, which could work, but in this one it just didn't do it for me. Number 19, Money Talks. This episode is alright, but it's so weird how at the end it just kind of stops. Like, Mr. Krabs has to give his soul to the Flying Dutchman, but then they are like, nah, he doesn't actually have to, because he owes it to some other guys too. But what kind of an excuse is that to not show him giving his soul to anyone then? Why would all of these ghosts show up at that exact moment just for this cheap little gag? But like I said, the episode is alright overall. I'm glad to see the Flying Dutchman back to his menacing former glory. Number 18, Sing a Song of Patrick.
I hate my life. I hate your life too, dude.
Man, I forgot how many great lines are in this episode. As a pseudo-musician, I really don't appreciate how mean they are towards Patrick's great song in this episode.
It used to be about the music.
I said slag off.
Number 17, Slimy Dancing. The epilogue in this episode used to confuse the hell out of me when I first saw it, but now I just enjoy it for the random little ending it is. And while I do think that this episode is a little unfair towards Squidward in the beginning, and that the cramp becoming so popular is a little unjustified, I didn't really mind it, because it's a cute little idea of Squidward dancing inside SpongeBob's body, and it has some funny moments too.
Hey, everybody! Let's all do the cramp!
Number 16, good ol' what's his name? Despite being the namesake for this episode, What's It To Ya only appears about halfway into this short, which is a real shame because I wish they had left Squidward in the dark about his name just a bit longer. This guy actually having such a ridiculous name is just such a dumb resolution that you gotta love it. Number 15, the original Fry Cook. I mentioned in my season 4 worst to best that I always love when Mr. Krabs' backstory gets explored, but I hate how they always portray it differently. Here SpongeBob is basically just another fry cook to him, even though in other episodes they make it seem as though he is irreplaceable to Mr. Krabs. That doesn't distract from the fact that this is a pretty funny episode though. I like the hip slang they have here and how they didn't really care about any sort of moral in the end. Number 14, Boat Smarts. I like the idea of Mrs. Puff leading a PSA about how SpongeBob is a safety hazard and the episode's presentation, and it's executed pretty freaking well with the dummy scene for example, but some of the scenes are a tad too brutal and unusual even for SpongeBob. Why would he even be allowed in a boat by himself for example, much less even agree to being in this PSA? But it's still a fun little short. Number 13, Nightlight. Okay, so I was never a nightlight kid. I liked to keep the door in my room open when I was younger, but other than that it was usually pitch black in there, since light actually disturbed me from sleeping. But I know that my best friend back in the day had one, and it was like a blue one with a smiley on it, and it had such a cool design. I don't remember why exactly I so desperately wanted to have that one, since I wouldn't have actually used it, but I can totally see why people would be afraid of the dark, and I think this episode portrays that fear pretty well, and also has some nice lines in it. But I still think that some moments are pretty dang random, especially when Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy come into play too. At least the rest of the episode isn't as random, I guess I take that back. Number 12, New Digs. Back when I was a bit of a teacher's pet, I somehow really wanted to just stay in school in the evening and live in it for a while. Really strange to think about now that I don't even want to set foot in that building anymore, so I guess I can kind of understand SpongeBob's thought process here. While the beginning of the episode feels a little disconnected from the rest of it, I mean SpongeBob coming late to work and being punished for it and him liking it so much there that he just has to stay there seem like two different concepts that were somehow just mushed together if you think about it. That doesn't distract from the rest of the episode, where they found some really creative ways to show SpongeBob redecorating the Krusty Krab to fit his needs and slowly turning it into his pineapple. Number 11, the two faces of Squidward. SpongeBob is very annoying in this one, but Squidward is just glorious. Oh. We're entering the top 10 with SpongeBob vs. the Paddy Gadget. I gave it my all to give this one a chance and found there's more to it than I thought at first glance. The rhymes are creative, at least for the most part, cause some of them I'll admit can be a bit subpar. The part about Squidward and his acne was stupid and I don't know why Neptune was even included, but all things considered this episode is great. Maybe someday they'll dig up this thing from its grave. Number 9, Spy Buddies. A very cool episode, with SpongeBob and Patrick chasing after Plankton in very creative ways, a nice little build-up and neat gadgets they use. It's a good parody of spy movies and such, and has some very quotable moments.
Wow, Plankton has to buy baby clothes?
How embarrassing!
I especially like the ending, because it's so random and plays with the cliche of a big reveal so many movies in this genre feel the need to have. Number 8, Roller Cowards. Definitely the episode of the season I can identify the most with. I used to totally be that guy that couldn't go on any of these rides because I was too big of a scaredy pants. And funnily enough, once I finally overcame my fear and went on one of these twirly cup carousels, I just had the worst stomach ache and didn't go on any more rides for a year or so. Let that be a lesson to you kids. Never try anything. Oh, and this episode is good too. A lot of memorable lines, good visual gags, and a nice little payoff in the end. Definitely deserves its spot at number 8. Number 7, The Krusty Plate. Yeah, I don't really know what it is with this season that it has so many shorts, but this one is definitely my favorite of them. They are a lot more fast-paced due to their limited runtime, and therefore have to focus on the main plot a lot more, which works in this case because Spongebob is really just slowly stacking up on weapons, and it therefore has a much clearer focus than in, say, Rise and Shine, which is pretty much just a joke compilation. It also makes for some pretty great visuals too, very trippy, I like it. Number 6, The Big Switch. This episode is a ton of fun and a nice change of pace for the Krusty Krab. Squidward got some pretty great lines, the new characters they introduced in this episode are pretty good. It's just a very good episode, you know?
Choking on sentiment!
Number 5, Friend or Foe. This is the best version of Mr. Krabs and Plankton's backstory. I love the whole build-up of the usual scheme, Mr. Krabs then explaining the backstory to the others, and Plankton later chiming in, telling his version of the story, only for Karen to be the one to tell the correct version in the end. It's a classic choosing business over friendship story, and there's just a bunch of things I really like about this episode, and yet I still don't particularly love it. I can't really put my finger on it, but I think some of the characters of their past just annoy me a bit, especially Stinky, and that they could have focused on their rivalry and success story a bit more. The way they did it is pretty much just, and then I had the formula for myself and was suddenly famous, but we don't see anything about their rivalry afterwards and how each of them got to be where they are now. It could have been my favorite episode of the season, but hey, I guess it's the closest to a full version of the story I'll ever get, and I can enjoy it for what it is. Number 4, Krabs Other Mode. I can't help it, I have a soft spot for icy landscape and snow related episodes. I think they made some pretty good use of this concept. It's a very creative episode, and these hockey players are so detached from the rest of the characters here, it's awesome. Not to mention Squidward's glorious paddy ice skating, and it also helps that they have even flipped the switch at the end and turned the Krusty Krab into a swimming pool. Some of the other episodes can definitely learn something from this one in terms of creativity at least. Number 3, Bucket Sweet Bucket. Now this is how you do a Plankton episode. I like how he just straight up changes his plan midway through redecorating to go after the formula instead, and I also like how they managed to incorporate Squidward in his scheme too. It's a nice set of characters with some very creative ways to show their traits, with Squidward redecorating the chum bucket in his own style, Spongebob, good-natured yet simple-minded as he is, putting the window on the wrong way, and Patrick being even dumber about it, and that's not the only joke in the episode I like.
And the secret formula is 1 bottle of molting lotion, get new safe travel size. It's a to-do list! Yeah!
Not cool.
But you're paying for the enhanced ambience.
Give me 4.
It's a hilarious episode through and through. That doesn't make me forget about this animation error though. That one's unforgivable. Number 2, Pest of the West. This special used to be one of the main events I was looking forward to on TV when they first advertised it. I was super hyped for it for 3 weeks or so, but since the Nickelodeon at our house always cut off at 8 PM to switch to BBC, I only saw about half of the episode at first. That obviously made me like it even more when I first saw it in its entirety a few months afterwards, and I still like this special a lot, but I think it could have been even better had they spent less time on everything other than the main plot of the episode, hence ditch both beginning and end. This way it kind of seems like a weaker version of Dungeons and Dragons in terms of structure, but don't get me wrong, the setup is pretty great. I just wish we could have seen a bit more of Spongebob. The songs were great in this episode, seeing Plankton as a genuine threat was refreshing, and I especially enjoyed the way different Western movie tropes were incorporated, and quite a few lines are pretty memorable.
The mollusks are coming!
What beeth the deal with ye old nutcase?
Howdy do, yo!
Charge him double for his drinks.
Over the lips and through the gums. Look out, tapeworm, here it comes. Smooth.
And at number 1 we have Breath of Fresh Squidward. I didn't think this was possible in season 5, but this is without a doubt one of my favorite SpongeBob episodes, period. It has so many great moments, like SpongeBob and Patrick showing their pictures to Squidward, Patrick and SpongeBob's transformation to Squidward in the end. This episode not only has a very refreshing, albeit simple concept, but also clever jokes, an understanding of the characters' traits that I really thought the writers had lost in the 5th season. Squidward is not the butt of the jokes, Patrick is dumb but in a way that is still entertaining, and seeing SpongeBob's breaking point is honestly pretty understandable, and he doesn't go off limit in disfavor of Squidward, which even finally got him his Employee of the Month award. I would really have to go out of my way to find flaws with this episode, and I really wish the rest of the 5th season could have been as good as this one. I think the main problem I had with the 5th season isn't necessarily that it is unoriginal or void of any comedy, because that just wouldn't be the truth. What does bother me, however, is that the writers seem to have completely lost their understanding of what made these characters entertaining in the first place, why they worked so well together, and why they are the main reason we enjoy SpongeBob as a show. It's not about completely senseless violence or disturbing imagery. At the end of the day, it is about having fun, and if I had to be completely honest, I didn't have fun watching most of the episodes of this season. I'm going to have to see how I feel about the rest of the seasons after I rewatch them before I can give any sort of final judgment, but for now, of all the seasons I have reviewed, this is definitely the weakest, putting it on number 5, right below season 1. But that's basically it for the list, guys. Like I said, let me know in which order you would have put the episodes on the list, and also check out the video description for more information about me, the channel, and some other videos you can check out if you want to. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon.